What would you do if inviting your ex for closure at your own wedding led to your husband closing the door on your marriage, literally and legally? Can one innocent decision destroy a family, or is the truth about my affair finally coming out? When the process server handed me those divorce papers, I wondered, how did it all unravel so fast? The morning of our wedding, I stood in the bridal suite at the city event venue, adjusting my veil for the 100th time. My sister Lina was bustling around me, fixing my train, and gushing about how perfect everything looked. "Ersilia, you're absolutely glowing," she said, stepping back to admire her handiwork. "Julian is going to lose his mind when he sees you." I smiled, but my stomach was churning. Not from wedding nerves, from the secret I'd been keeping for the past month. I'd invited Edric Sloane to our wedding, my ex-boyfriend, the man I'd dated for 2 years before meeting Julian. "Lina," I said carefully, "I need to tell you something." She paused, lipstick halfway to my mouth. "What's wrong? You look pale." "I invited Edric." Her eyes widened. "Edric, as in, your ex-Edric, the one Julian can't stand hearing about." "It's not what you think," I said quickly. I needed closure. We ended things so badly 3 years ago, and I thought having him here, seeing me happy with Julian, would finally put that chapter to rest." Lina set down the lipstick. "Does Julian know?" I hesitated. "I mentioned it." "You mentioned it. Ersilia, what exactly did you say?" "I said I was thinking about inviting some old friends, and he said whatever made me happy was fine with him." "But you didn't specifically mention Edric's name." "He didn't ask for a complete guest list breakdown," I snapped, then immediately felt guilty. "Look, it's fine. Edric and I are just friends now. We've been texting occasionally, and he's genuinely happy for me. This is about closure, not drama." Lina looked skeptical, but before she could respond, there was a knock on the door. "Ersilia, it's time," called the wedding coordinator. My heart pounded as I walked down the aisle. Julian looked incredibly handsome in his black tuxedo, his dark hair perfectly styled, his brown eyes soft with emotion as he watched me approach. For a moment, I forgot all about Edric and focused on the man I was about to marry, my steady, reliable Julian, who worked as a software developer and always made me feel safe. The ceremony was beautiful. We exchanged vows under an arch of white roses, promising to love and cherish each other through everything life might throw at us. Julian's voice cracked slightly when he said, "I do," and I felt tears streaming down my cheeks as we kissed. It wasn't until the cocktail hour that things went sideways. I was mingling with guests, accepting congratulations and compliments on my dress, when I spotted him across the room. Edric looked exactly the same, tall and lean with that easy smile that had first attracted me to him. He was talking to his uncle Derek, who worked with Julian's father Paul at the insurance company. My stomach flipped, part excitement, part terror. "Ersilia," Edric called out when he saw me, weaving through the crowd with a champagne flute in hand. "You look absolutely stunning. Congratulations." He leaned in for a hug, and I caught a whiff of his familiar cologne, the same scent that used to drive me crazy. "Thank you for coming," I murmured against his ear. "It means everything to me." When we pulled apart, I noticed Julian approaching from across the room. His expression was confused, his brow furrowed as he tried to place Edric's face. "Julian," I called out brightly. "Come meet Edric Sloane. Edric, this is my husband Julian." The recognition hit Julian's face like a physical blow. His smile faltered, and for a moment he just stood there, staring at my ex-boyfriend. "Edric," Julian said slowly, extending his hand. "I wasn't expecting to see you here." "Ersilia was kind enough to invite me," Edric replied smoothly, shaking Julian's hand with that charming smile. "I hope you don't mind. I know our history might make things awkward, but I wanted to wish you both well. You're a lucky man." Julian's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Right. Well, thank you for coming." The conversation was stilted and brief, but I could feel the tension radiating from Julian as we moved through the rest of the cocktail hour. His mother Lydia kept shooting me sharp looks from across the room, and I overheard her whispering urgently to Paul about that boy from Ersilia's past. During dinner, Edric was seated at a table with Derek and some of Julian's co-workers. I watched him charming everyone with stories and jokes, being his usual charismatic self. Several times I caught him looking at me, and he'd wink or raise his glass in a small toast. Julian noticed too. He seems to be enjoying himself, he said quietly, cutting his chicken with more force than necessary. I'm glad, I replied. I was worried it might be weird, but look how well everyone's getting along. Julian set down his fork. Ersilia, when exactly did you invite him? A few weeks ago. Why? You told me you mentioned inviting old friends, but you specifically said college friends. Edric wasn't a college friend. I felt heat rising in my cheeks. Does it matter? He's here, he's being perfectly appropriate, and everyone likes him. That's not the point. The point is you deliberately misled me about who you were inviting to our wedding. I did not deliberately mislead you, I hissed, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. You're being paranoid. Julian stared at me for a long moment, then picked up his fork and resumed eating without another word. The real disaster came during the toasts. After Julian's best man and Lina had given their speeches, Edric suddenly stood up at his table. Excuse me, he called out, tapping his champagne flute with a butter knife. I hope you don't mind, but I'd like to say a few words. My blood turned to ice. This wasn't part of the plan. Julian's face went completely pale. I've known Ersilia for several years now, Edric began, his voice carrying easily across the reception hall. And I've watched her grow into the incredible woman she is today. She has this amazing ability to light up any room she enters, to make you feel like you're the only person in the world when she smiles at you. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some guests looked confused, others uncomfortable. Lydia's face was a mask of barely controlled fury. Ersilia taught me what it means to truly care about someone, Edric continued, his eyes locked on mine. She showed me that love isn't just about the good times, it's about weathering the storms together. And even though our paths diverged, I've never stopped caring about her happiness. He raised his glass. So here's to Ersilia and Julian. May your love story be everything ours. Well, may it be everything you both deserve. The room fell silent. The double meaning in his words hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Julian's hands were clenched so tightly around his napkin that his knuckles were white. Thank you, Edric, I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. That was very sweet. But Julian had already pushed back his chair and walked out of the reception hall. I found him 10 minutes later in the hotel lobby, loosening his tie and staring out at the parking lot. Julian, I'm so sorry. I had no idea he was going to do that. He turned to look at me, and I was shocked by the hurt in his eyes. Didn't you? Because it sounded like he was talking about an ongoing relationship, not something that ended 3 years ago. That's ridiculous. You're reading way too much into it. Am I? Because the way he looked at you during that toast, the way he talked about still caring about your happiness. Ersilia, that didn't sound like closure to me. That sounded like a man who's still in love with you. You're being insecure, I said, reaching for his hand. Edric is just being Edric. He's always been dramatic and emotional. It doesn't mean anything. Julian pulled his hand away. The fact that you know him well enough to say he's always been dramatic tells me everything I need to know about how much contact you've actually had with him. Julian, I need some air, he said, walking toward the exit. Go back to the reception. I'll be up to the room later. I stood there watching my husband walk away on our wedding night, and for the first time, a tiny voice in the back of my mind whispered that maybe I'd made a terrible mistake. 3 weeks after our wedding, I was sitting at my desk at the administrative office where I worked, staring at my phone. Edric had been texting me almost daily since the wedding, and I found myself looking forward to his messages more than I wanted to admit. Edric, hope you're settling into married life well. Still think about that beautiful ceremony. Me, thank you again for coming. It meant a lot to have you there. Edric, even though I made Julian uncomfortable, I feel bad about that speech. Maybe I got a little carried away. Me, don't worry about it. Julian's just adjusting to everything. Edric, would love to catch up properly sometime. Coffee, just as friends, of course. I stared at the message for a full 5 minutes before responding. Me, I'd like that. Let me check my schedule. That evening, Julian was working late on a software project, hunched over his laptop at the kitchen table, with papers scattered everywhere. Our 7-year-old daughter, Maris, was doing homework nearby, occasionally asking for help with math problems. How was work today? Julian asked absently, not looking up from his screen. Fine, busy. The usual administrative chaos. I hesitated, then added, I might grab coffee with an old friend tomorrow after work. Would you mind picking up Maris from soccer practice? Sure, no problem. Which friend? My heart skipped. Just someone I haven't seen in a while. We're trying to catch up. Julian nodded, still focused on his code. Sounds good. I felt a stab of guilt at the half-truth, but I pushed it down. It really was just coffee between old friends. There was nothing wrong with that. The next day, I met Edric at a small cafe downtown called The Grind. It was tucked away on a side street, the kind of place where you were unlikely to run into anyone you knew. Not that I was hiding anything, I just wanted to avoid any awkward encounters. Edric was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee. He stood up when he saw me, pulling out my chair like a gentleman. You look great, he said, settling back into his seat. Marriage suits you. Thank you. You look good too. And he did. Edric had always been handsome, but there was something about his confidence that made him magnetic. We spent the first hour catching up on work and mutual friends. Edric was working in marketing now, traveling frequently for client meetings. He told funny stories about hotel mishaps and difficult customers, making me laugh until my sides hurt. Before we dive deeper into the story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. I've missed this, he said suddenly, reaching across the table to touch my hand. Just talking to you. You always got my sense of humor. I should have pulled my hand away immediately. Instead, I let it linger for a moment before slowly withdrawing it. I've missed talking to you too, I admitted. Julian's wonderful, but he's so serious sometimes. He doesn't really appreciate sarcasm or wordplay the way you do. Different personality types, Edric said diplomatically. But that's good, right? Balance and all that. We talked for another hour, and I found myself sharing things I hadn't told anyone else. My frustrations with work, my concerns about Maris starting to become more independent, my occasional loneliness when Julian got absorbed in his programming projects. You know you can always talk to me, right? Edric said as we prepared to leave. I mean it, Ersilia. I know things ended badly between us, but I want you to be happy. And if you ever need someone to listen... Thank you, I said softly. That means a lot. We hugged goodbye in the parking lot, and I caught myself breathing in his familiar scent again. When I got home, Julian was helping Maris with a science project about the solar system. How was coffee? He asked, gluing a painted styrofoam ball to a wire. Good. Nice to catch up. I kissed the top of Maris's head. How did soccer practice go? Mom, I scored 2 goals, Maris exclaimed, bouncing in her chair. Coach said I'm getting really good at dribbling. That's wonderful, sweetheart. The rest of the evening passed normally, but I found myself distracted, replaying conversations from coffee and checking my phone more frequently than usual. Over the next few weeks, the coffee meetings became a regular thing. Every Tuesday, I would tell Julian I was working late or meeting a friend, and instead I'd spend 2 hours at the grind with Edric. We talked about everything, Books, movies, childhood memories, dreams for the future. Julian didn't seem to notice my Tuesday absences at first, but Maris did. "Mummy, why are you never home for dinner on Tuesdays anymore?" she asked one evening, looking up from her plate of spaghetti with those big brown eyes she'd inherited from Julian. "I've been working on some special projects that require overtime," I said smoothly. "But I'm always home by bedtime, aren't I?" "Yeah, but I miss having dinner with both you and Daddy." Julian glanced up from his food. "You've been working late a lot lately. Is everything okay at the office?" "Just busy season," I replied. "You know how it is." But Julian was starting to pay closer attention. The following Tuesday, when I announced I'd be working late again, he frowned. "Didn't you work late last Tuesday, and the Tuesday before that?" "Different projects," I said, avoiding his eyes as I gathered my purse and keys. "Which projects specifically? Maybe I can help you streamline some processes." I felt trapped. Julian's logical, problem-solving mind was exactly what I'd fallen in love with, but right now it felt like a spotlight exposing my lies. "It's mostly filing and administrative stuff, nothing you'd find interesting." Julian studied my face for a moment longer than was comfortable. "Okay, what time should I expect you home?" "Probably around 8:30. I kissed him goodbye, hating myself for the deception but unable to stop. At the cafe, Edric was waiting with my usual order, a vanilla latte with an extra shot. "You seem stressed," he observed as I sat down. Julian's starting to ask questions about my schedule. "Maybe you should tell him we've been meeting." I shook my head quickly. He wouldn't understand. He already doesn't like you after that wedding toast. "I really am sorry about that. I didn't mean to cause problems." "It's fine. He's very black and white about things. He doesn't understand that people can be friends with their exes." Edric leaned forward. "Is that what we are? Friends?" The question hung between us, loaded with implication. I felt my cheeks flush. "Of course. What else would we be?" "I don't know. Sometimes when we're talking, it feels like we're picking up where we left off 3 years ago." "Edric, I'm not saying I want to complicate your marriage," he said quickly. "I just think there's still something between us, some kind of connection that never really went away. I should have ended it right there. Should have paid for my coffee, walked out, and never looked back. Instead, I heard myself saying, 'I feel it too.' The admission hung in the air between us like a confession. "So what do we do about it?" Edric asked softly. "Nothing. I'm married. I have a daughter. This is just nostalgia or something." "Is it?" I stared into my coffee cup, unable to meet his eyes. "It has to be." But even as I said it, I knew I was lying to both of us. When I got home that night, Julian was reading in bed. He looked up when I entered the bedroom, and I noticed he was holding a receipt. "How was work?" he asked casually. "Exhausting. I'm ready for bed." "I found this in your purse when I was looking for a pen earlier." He held up the receipt. "It's from the Grind Cafe, dated today at 6:30 p.m. My blood turned to ice. "Oh, that. I stopped for coffee on the way home from work. But you told me you were working late at the office until 8:30. "I was. I just needed caffeine for the drive home." Julian set the receipt on his nightstand. "The timestamp shows you were at the cafe at 6:30. If you left work at your normal time and went straight there, that would put you leaving the office around 6:15. But you told me you were working until 8:30. I felt like a defendant being cross-examined. "Julian, why are you interrogating me over a coffee receipt?" "I'm not interrogating you. I'm trying to understand why the timeline doesn't add up." "Maybe I got the time wrong. Maybe I left work earlier than I thought. Does it really matter?" Julian studied my face in the lamplight. "I guess not. I feel like we haven't been connecting lately. Like there's something you're not telling me." The guilt was crushing, but I forced myself to sound offended. "I can't believe you're making such a big deal out of this. So I stopped for coffee and got the time mixed up. That makes me a liar." "I didn't say you were lying." "That's exactly what you're implying. And frankly, it's insulting. I work hard all day, and when I come home, I get the third degree about coffee receipts. Julian held up his hands. You're right, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make you feel attacked. I turned away from him, pulling off my earrings with more force than necessary. I'm going to shower. In the bathroom, I stared at myself in the mirror. My reflection looked guilty, flushed, caught, but I pushed down the self-doubt and focused on my irritation with Julian instead. He was being paranoid and controlling. All I'd done was have coffee with an old friend. The fact that I was lying about who that friend was seemed less important than Julian's lack of trust. At least, that's what I told myself as I deleted Edric's latest text message and climbed into bed next to my husband, who was pretending to be asleep. Sunday dinner at Julian's parents' house had always been a tradition, but lately these gatherings felt like walking into a minefield. Lydia Venn had a way of making her disapproval known without saying anything directly, and I could feel her watching me like a hawk every time I checked my phone. Today was particularly tense. We were seated around the dining room table, Julian, myself, Maris, and Julian's parents, Paul and Lydia. The conversation had been stilted from the moment we arrived, with Lydia making pointed comments about the importance of honesty in marriage, and Paul desperately trying to change the subject to safer topics like the weather and Maris's school performance. My phone buzzed with a text message just as Lydia was serving the pot roast. I glanced down and saw Edric's name on the screen. Edric, thinking about our conversation yesterday. You looked beautiful, as always. I felt a flutter of excitement mixed with guilt. Our coffee meetings had become increasingly intimate over the past month, with longer hugs goodbye and more personal conversations about our feelings for each other. Nothing physical had happened, but the emotional connection was undeniable. I couldn't help but smile as I typed back a response. Me. You're sweet. I enjoyed talking too. Ersilia, Julian said sharply, could you put your phone away during dinner? I looked up, startled. Everyone was staring at me. Sorry, it was just work. On a Sunday? Lydia asked, raising one perfectly plucked eyebrow. Sometimes emergencies come up, I replied, but I could feel my cheeks burning. My phone buzzed again. This time I should have ignored it, but curiosity got the better of me. I glanced down to see another message from Edric. Edric, can't wait to see you Tuesday. I have something I want to tell you. I bit my lip to keep from smiling and quickly typed back. Me. Mysterious. I'm intrigued. Ersilia, Julian's voice was cold now. I asked you to put the phone away. I heard you, I snapped, but I kept typing. Just give me 1 second. Edric, let's just say I've been doing some thinking about us. This time I couldn't suppress the smile that spread across my face. The implication in his message made my heart race. What's so funny? Maris asked innocently. I looked up to find everyone staring at me again. Julian's face was a mask of barely controlled anger, while Lydia looked like she'd just witnessed something scandalous. Nothing, sweetheart, just a silly message from Aunt Lina. It was a stupid lie, and I could tell Julian didn't believe it for a second. Why don't you call Lina back after dinner? Paul suggested diplomatically. I'd love to hear how she's doing. Oh, it's not important enough for a call, I said quickly, finally putting my phone face down on the table. Just sister stuff. The rest of dinner passed in uncomfortable silence, broken only by Maris chattering about her upcoming school play. I tried to focus on my daughter's excitement, but I kept thinking about Edric's message and what he might want to tell me. After dinner, while Paul and Julian were loading the dishwasher, Lydia cornered me in the living room. I don't know what's going on with you lately, she said in a low voice, but whatever it is, you need to stop. I have no idea what you're talking about. The phone calls, the secretive texting, the way you light up when you get certain messages. I've been married for 34 years, Ersilia. I know what infidelity looks like. My mouth dropped open. How dare you accuse me of cheating? I have never been unfaithful to Julian. Maybe not physically, but emotionally. The signs are all there. You're being ridiculous, and frankly, it's none of your business. Lydia stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. My son is my business, and that little girl in there is my granddaughter. If you think I'm going to stand by and watch you destroy this family for some excitement, you're mistaken. I'm not destroying anything. Julian gets upset for no reason, and apparently it runs in the family. No reason? Lydia's eyes flashed. You invited your ex-boyfriend to your wedding without telling your husband. You've been sneaking around, lying about working late, and now you're sitting at my dinner table giggling over text messages like a teenager. What exactly would you call that? I felt cornered and defensive. I call it having friends. Just because I married Julian doesn't mean I have to cut off all contact with everyone from my past. There's a difference between maintaining friendships and carrying on emotional affairs. I am not having an affair. Then prove it. Show Julian those text messages. My blood ran cold. That's a violation of privacy. Only if you have something to hide. Before I could respond, Julian appeared in the doorway. Everything okay in here? Fine, I said quickly. Your mother was just sharing some unsolicited opinions about my friendships. Julian looked between us, clearly sensing the tension. What kind of opinions? Nothing important, Lydia said, but her eyes remained fixed on me. Just some concerns about boundaries. What boundaries? Julian asked. I grabbed my purse from the coffee table. I think we should go. Maris has school tomorrow. Ersilia. Now, Julian. The car ride home was silent except for Maris chattering about her grandmother's apple pie. Julian kept glancing at me, but I stared out the passenger window, seething about Lydia's accusations. Once we got home and Maris was settled in her room with a book, Julian confronted me. What was that about at my parents' house? Your mother thinks she can police my friendships. What friendships specifically? I felt trapped again. Just friends from work, old college friends. She seems to think I'm not allowed to have a social life. You keep mentioning these old friends, but I never see them. You never invite them over or talk about them by name. Because I know you'll make a big deal out of it, just like you're doing now. Julian sat down heavily on the couch. Ersilia, I feel like I don't know you anymore. You're secretive, you're defensive, you're always on your phone. When I try to talk to you about it, you make me feel like I'm being controlling or paranoid. Maybe because you are being controlling and paranoid. Am I? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like my wife is hiding something from me. I could have ended it right there, could have sat down next to him, taken his hands, and confessed everything. Told him about the coffee meetings with Edric, about the growing emotional connection, about how confused and guilty I felt. Instead, I doubled down. The only thing I'm hiding is how suffocated I feel in this marriage, I said coldly. I can't have a conversation, send a text message, or grab coffee without getting interrogated. Do you have any idea how exhausting that is? Julian's face went pale. Suffocated? Yes, suffocated. You want to control every aspect of my life, monitor my every move. That's not love, Julian. That's possession. I don't want to control you. I want to understand why my wife has become a stranger. I haven't become a stranger. You've become suspicious and jealous for no reason. Then help me understand. Tell me about these friends you're meeting. Introduce me to them. Why should I have to prove my innocence to you? Because marriages are built on trust and transparency, and lately we have neither. I felt my phone buzz in my purse and instinctively moved to check it, but Julian's eyes followed the movement. Don't, he said quietly. Don't what? Don't check your phone right now. We're having an important conversation about our marriage. I can multitask. Apparently you can't, because every time your phone buzzes, you completely check out of whatever we're discussing. I pulled out my phone defiantly. It might be important. It was another message from Edric. Hope you had a good dinner with the in-laws. Can't wait to see you Tuesday. I quickly closed the message, but not before Julian caught a glimpse of the notification. Who is that? Work. On a Sunday night? I told you, sometimes there are emergencies. Julian stared at me for a long moment, then stood up. I'm going to bed. Julian, I can't do this anymore tonight, Ersilia. Every conversation we have turns into an argument where I'm the villain for caring about my marriage. He started toward the stairs, then paused. For what it's worth, I don't want to control you. I just want my wife back. I watched him climb the stairs, and for a moment I felt a pang of genuine remorse. But then my phone buzzed again, and I found myself smiling at another message from Edric, and the guilt faded into excitement about what he wanted to tell me on Tuesday. I told myself that Julian was overreacting, that his jealousy was pushing me away, that I deserved to have friends who appreciated and understood me. I told myself a lot of things that night. None of them were true. The confrontation with Julian's family had shaken me more than I wanted to admit, but instead of pulling back from my meetings with Edric, I found myself seeking comfort in his validation. When Tuesday arrived, I was actually eager to get to the cafe and away from the suffocating atmosphere at home. Edric was waiting at our usual table, but something was different about his demeanor. He seemed nervous, fidgeting with his coffee cup and avoiding eye contact when I sat down. So, I said, settling into my chair, what was this mysterious thing you wanted to tell me? He took a deep breath. I've been thinking a lot about us, about these meetings, about how I feel when I'm with you. My heart started beating faster. And I think we need to be honest about what's happening here. This isn't just friendship, Ersilia, at least not for me. I felt a thrill of excitement mixed with terror. Edric, I'm still in love with you, he said quietly. I never stopped loving you. When you invited me to your wedding, I thought maybe I could handle just being friends, but I can't. Every time I see you, every time we talk, it just confirms what I already knew. We belong together. The words hung in the air between us. I should have shut it down immediately, should have told him this was inappropriate and walked away. Instead, I felt tears pricking at my eyes. I love Julian, I whispered. Do you? Because the way you talk about him, it sounds more like obligation than love. You said yourself that you feel suffocated in your marriage. It's complicated. It doesn't have to be. Edric reached across the table and took my hand. This time I didn't pull away. I know you feel it too, this connection between us. I can see it in your eyes. Even if I did, I can't just leave my marriage. I have Maris to think about. I'm not asking you to leave Julian tomorrow. I'm just asking you to be honest about your feelings. I stared down at our joined hands. His touch felt electric, forbidden, exciting in a way that Julian's hadn't in years. I care about you, I admitted, more than I should. Then that's enough for now. We sat there holding hands across the table, and I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff. One more step and there would be no going back. I should go, I said finally, but I made no move to pull my hand away. Not yet. Stay a little longer. So I did. We talked for another hour, and the conversation became increasingly intimate. Edric told me about the dreams he'd been having about me, about how he'd compared every woman he'd dated to me and found them lacking. I found myself sharing my loneliness, my frustration with Julian's logical approach to everything, my feeling that I'd lost myself in marriage and motherhood. You haven't lost yourself, Edric said softly. You're right here. The real you, the woman I fell in love with. She's been hiding, but she's still there. When we finally left the cafe, Edric walked me to my car. In the parking lot, he pulled me into a hug that lasted far too long. I could feel his heart beating against my chest, could smell his cologne, could feel the warmth of his breath against my ear. I meant what I said in there, he whispered. I love you, Ersilia. I always have. I pulled back to look at him, and for a moment I thought he might kiss me. Part of me wanted him to. Instead, he cupped my face gently and said, Think about what I said, okay? I drove home in a daze, my mind reeling from everything that had happened. When I walked through the front door, Julian was helping Maris with a book report at the kitchen table. How was work? He asked without looking up. Fine, I managed, hoping my voice sounded normal. But Julian did look up then, and I saw his eyes narrow slightly as he took in my flushed cheeks and dishevelled appearance. "You look upset. Everything okay?" "Just a long day. I'm going to take a shower." In the bathroom, I stared at myself in the mirror. My lips were swollen from biting them during the emotional conversation with Edric. My eyes were bright with unshed tears, and there was a mark on my neck from Edric's jacket zipper during our long hug. I quickly covered the mark with concealer and tried to compose myself, but I felt like I was falling apart inside. Over the next few weeks, my relationship with Edric intensified, while my marriage continued to deteriorate. We started texting constantly throughout the day, sharing inside jokes and intimate thoughts. I began looking forward to his messages more than conversations with my own husband. At work, my co-workers started to notice my distraction. My friend Rebecca from accounting cornered me one afternoon. "Okay, spill," she said, perching on the edge of my desk. "You've been glowing for weeks. Are you and Julian trying for another baby?" I laughed, but it sounded forced even to my ears. "No, nothing like that." "Then what? You've got that look. You know, the one women get when they're falling in love." "I'm already married, Rebecca." "Doesn't mean you can't fall in love again. With your husband, I mean." She paused, studying my face. "Unless... Oh my God, Ersilia, please tell me you're not having an affair." "Don't be ridiculous." "I'm serious. You're constantly on your phone. You've been working late every Tuesday for months. And yesterday, I saw you in the parking lot of that cafe downtown when you were supposed to be in a meeting." My blood turned cold. "You saw me?" "I was driving to lunch with my sister. You were with some tall guy, very good looking. The two of you looked pretty cozy." I felt trapped. "He's just an old friend." "An old friend you meet secretly and lie to your husband about." "I'm not lying." "Ersilia, I've been married for 15 years. I know what cheating looks like, even when it's just emotional. And honey, you are playing with fire." "It's not what you think." "Then what is it? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're about to blow up your entire life for some excitement." Rebecca's words echoed Lydia's accusations, and I felt defensive anger rising in my chest. "Everyone seems to think they know what's best for my marriage except me," I snapped. "I'm trying to help you. Julian's a good man, and Maris needs her parents together. Julian and I have problems that existed long before I reconnected with Edric." "Edric? As in your ex-boyfriend Edric? The one you invited to your wedding?" I realized I'd said too much. "Rebecca, please don't." "Oh, Ersilia, what are you doing?" "I'm not doing anything wrong. We're just friends." "Friends don't sneak around and lie to their spouses." That evening, Julian presented me with a spreadsheet, an actual printed spreadsheet with dates, times, and expenses highlighted in yellow. "What is this?" I asked, though my stomach was already sinking. "It's a record of your Tuesday evening activities for the past 2 months," Julian said calmly. "The dates you claim to be working late, cross-referenced with your actual work schedule, your credit card purchases, and your location data." I stared at the document in horror. He'd tracked everything: the coffee purchases at the grind, the times I'd actually left the office, even the gas station visits near the cafe. "You've been spying on me." "I've been trying to understand why my wife has been lying to me for months." "This is insane, Julian. You made a spreadsheet to track my movements like I'm some kind of criminal." "You've been meeting someone every Tuesday for 2 months and lying about it. What would you call that?" "I call it having coffee with a friend." "Which friend? Because according to this data, you've been meeting the same person at the same location every week. So either tell me who it is, or I'm going to assume the worst." I felt cornered, desperate. "It's Edric, okay? I've been having coffee with Edric." Julian's face went completely white. "Your ex-boyfriend, the one you invited to our wedding without telling me." "Yes, but it's not what you think. What I think is that my wife has been having an emotional affair for 2 months and lying to my face about it." "It's not an affair. We're just friends talking about old times." "Friends don't require this level of secrecy, Ersilia." Friends don't make you lie to your husband and sneak around like a teenager. Julian sat down heavily, the spreadsheet crumpling in his hands. How long has this been going on? And I don't mean the coffee meetings. I mean the feelings. There are no feelings. Please don't lie to me anymore. I can't take it. I looked at my husband, really looked at him, and saw the pain and exhaustion in his eyes. He'd lost weight over the past few months, and there were new lines around his eyes that I hadn't noticed before. Julian, I love you, he said quietly. I have loved you since the day we met, and I thought you loved me too. But the woman I married wouldn't do this. She wouldn't lie and sneak around and choose another man's company over her own family. I do love you. No, you don't. Not anymore. And maybe that's my fault. Maybe I became too comfortable, too boring, too focused on work and responsibilities. But Ersilia, we have a daughter together. We have a life together. Doesn't that mean anything to you? I felt tears streaming down my cheeks, but I couldn't find the words to respond. Julian stood up slowly. I'm going to stay at my parents' house tonight. I need time to think about what happens next. Julian, please. I'll pick up Maris from school tomorrow and take her to dinner. You can use that time to decide what you really want, because I can't keep living like this. After he left, I sat alone in our kitchen, staring at the spreadsheet evidence of my deception. For the first time in months, I wasn't thinking about Edric or feeling excited about our next meeting. I was thinking about what I'd already lost and wondering if it was too late to get it back. But even as I sat there crying, my phone buzzed with a text from Edric, and despite everything, I still reached for it. Edric, missing you tonight. Can't wait to see you Thursday instead of Tuesday this week. And despite the devastation around me, despite Julian's pain and Maris's confusion and my own guilt, I found myself typing back, missing you too. Some habits, it seemed, were harder to break than others. I spent the night alone in our house, alternating between crying and staring at Julian's spreadsheet. Every highlighted entry felt like an accusation, every timestamp a reminder of how deep I'd dug myself into this hole. By morning, I'd convinced myself that I could fix this. I would end things with Edric, focus on my marriage, and somehow make Julian understand that nothing physical had happened. But when I called Julian's phone, it went straight to voicemail. Julian, it's me. Please call me back. We need to talk. I can explain everything and I want to work this out. I love you. He didn't call back. At work, I was a mess. I kept checking my phone for messages from Julian while trying to avoid Rebecca's concerned looks. Around noon, I finally broke down and called Edric. I need to see you, I said when he answered. Can you meet me for lunch? Of course, everything okay? You sound upset. Julian knows about our meetings. There was a pause. How much does he know? Everything. He made a spreadsheet tracking my movements for the past 2 months. Jesus. Okay, meet me at the grind in 20 minutes. When I arrived at the cafe, Edric was already there, looking genuinely concerned. He stood up and pulled me into a hug, and I found myself clinging to him like a lifeline. Tell me what happened, he said, guiding me to our usual table. I explained about the confrontation with Julian, about his ultimatum, about how I'd spent the night alone wondering if my marriage was over. Maybe this is a good thing, Edric said carefully. Maybe it's time to stop pretending and be honest about what we both want. What we want? Edric, I have a daughter. I have a life with Julian. A life that makes you miserable. You've told me yourself how suffocated you feel, how Julian doesn't understand you the way I do. That doesn't mean I want to destroy my family. Edric reached across the table and took my hands. Sometimes things have to fall apart before they can be rebuilt into something better. This isn't some romantic movie, Edric. This is real life. If Julian divorces me, I could lose custody of Maris. Not if we're together. We could build a life, a real life. You, me, and Maris. The fantasy was tempting, but reality crashed down on me. Maris barely knows you. Julian is her father. Stepfather, Edric corrected, and kids adapt. She'll learn to love me the way you do. The way I do. Come on, Ersilia, don't pretend you don't feel it. This connection between us, this love, it's real. It's more real than whatever you have with Julian. I stared at him, and for the first time in months I saw clearly what I'd been doing. I'd been so caught up in the excitement of feeling wanted and understood that I'd lost sight of what I was risking. I need to go home, I said, pulling my hands away. I need to try to save my marriage. Edric's expression darkened. Your marriage was over long before I came back into the picture. You're just too scared to admit it. That's not true. Isn't it? When's the last time Julian made you laugh the way I do? When's the last time you felt truly seen and appreciated? Julian loves me. Julian loves the idea of you, the wife, the mother, the woman who fits into his perfect little life plan. But he doesn't love the real you, passionate, complicated, beautiful you. I felt tears starting again. I have to try. Fine. Go home. Try to save your marriage. But when you realize that you're just delaying the inevitable, I'll be here. I left the cafe feeling more confused than ever, but I was determined to fight for my family. When I got home that evening, Julian's car was in the driveway. I found him in Maris's room, reading her a bedtime story. "Mommy," Maris exclaimed when she saw me, "Daddy's back." "Hi, sweetheart," I said, kissing her forehead. "Did you have a good day?" We went to the zoo and saw the penguins, and then we had ice cream for dinner because Daddy said sometimes rules are meant to be broken. I glanced at Julian, who was avoiding eye contact. That sounds wonderful. After Maris was asleep, Julian and I sat across from each other at the kitchen table, like adversaries preparing for battle. "I've been thinking," he said quietly, "about us, about what happens next. Julian, I want to save our marriage. I know I made mistakes, but nothing physical happened with Edric. It was just talking, just friendship that maybe got a little too close." "A little too close?" Julian's voice was sharp. "Ersilia, you've been lying to me for months. You've been emotionally intimate with another man, sharing things with him that you won't share with me. I know, and I'm sorry. I'll end it with Edric completely. No more meetings, no more texts, no contact at all. How can I trust you? How do I know this won't happen again the next time you feel unsatisfied or suffocated? Because I choose you, I choose our family." Julian was quiet for a long moment, and I thought maybe I was getting through to him. Then he pulled out his phone and set it on the table. "I want to believe you," he said, "but I need proof that you're serious about ending this." "What kind of proof?" "Call him, right now. End it with Edric while I'm sitting here." My heart sank. "Julian, that's not necessary. It's absolutely necessary. If you want to save our marriage, you need to show me that you're willing to cut all ties with him." With shaking hands, I dialed Edric's number. He answered on the second ring. "Ersilia? I wasn't expecting to hear from you so soon." "Edric, I need to talk to you about us." Julian was watching my face intently, and I could see the pain in his eyes as he listened to my side of the conversation. "I can't see you anymore," I continued. "I need to focus on my marriage and my family." There was a pause. "Is Julian there? Is he making you do this?" "No one's making me do anything. This is my choice." "I don't believe that. Earlier today you were talking about how miserable you are with him." I glanced at Julian, whose face had gone pale. "I never said that." "Yes, you did. You said you felt trapped, that Julian doesn't understand you the way I do. You said, 'Edric, please, I need you to respect my decision.' Fine, but when you change your mind, and you will, you know where to find me." I hung up the phone, but the damage was already done. Julian had heard enough of Edric's side of the conversation to understand that I'd been sharing intimate details about our marriage. "You told him you felt trapped," Julian said quietly. "Julian, you discussed our private marriage problems with your ex-boyfriend." "I was just venting. Everyone needs someone to talk to." "You have me to talk to. You have your sister, your friends. But instead, you chose to share our most intimate problems with the one person guaranteed to use that information to drive a wedge between us. I could see that I was losing him, that every word I said was making things worse instead of better. What do you want me to say, Julian? I made a mistake. I'm human. I'm sorry. I want you to understand that this wasn't just a mistake. This was a choice. Every lie you told, every secret meeting, every text message, those were choices. And now I have to make a choice too. What does that mean? Julian stood up from the table. It means I've already contacted a lawyer. The words hit me like a physical blow. You what? I met with Patricia Morton at Morton and Hayes this afternoon. She's going to represent me in the divorce proceedings. Divorce? Julian, you can't be serious. We can work through this. Can we? Because I've been trying to work through this for months, and you've been lying to me the entire time. I ended it with Edric. I called him right in front of you. After I forced you to, and only after you got caught. How is that supposed to rebuild trust? I felt panic rising in my chest. What about Maris? You can't break up our family over this. I'm not breaking up our family. You already did that when you chose another man over your husband and daughter. I never chose him over Maris. Didn't you? Every Tuesday when you lied about working late, you were choosing time with Edric over time with your family. Every text message you answered during dinner, every phone call you took in secret, those were choices. I was crying now, desperate. Julian, please, don't do this. I love you. I love you too. That's why this hurts so much. He started toward the stairs, then paused. Patricia wants to meet with you next week to discuss custody arrangements and division of assets. I suggest you get your own lawyer. Julian, I'm sleeping in the guest room tonight. And Ersilia, I've changed the passwords on all our joint accounts and credit cards. If you need money for a lawyer, you'll have to ask me for it. I sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at my phone and wondering how everything had fallen apart so quickly. Part of me wanted to call Edric, to seek comfort in his arms and his promises of a better life together. But for the first time in months, I didn't reach for my phone. Instead, I sat in the silence of my house and tried to understand how I'd destroyed the best thing in my life for something that had never been real at all. The next morning, I woke up to find Julian gone and a business card on the kitchen counter. Patricia Morton, attorney at law. Below her contact information, Julian had written a note. The meeting is scheduled for Friday at 2 p.m. Don't be late. As I held that business card, I finally understood that this wasn't a threat or a negotiation tactic. Julian was serious about ending our marriage, and I had no one to blame but myself. The process server found me at work 3 days later. The process server arrived at my office on a Thursday afternoon, just as I was getting ready to leave for the day. I was gathering my things, checking my phone for messages from Edric. Despite everything, we'd started texting again, when a woman in a professional suit approached my desk. Ersilia Venn. Yes? You've been served. She handed me a thick manila envelope and walked away, leaving me standing there with shaking hands while my co-workers stared. I could feel Rebecca's eyes on me from across the room, her expression a mixture of sympathy and "I told you so." Inside the envelope were divorce papers, custody documents, and a restraining order preventing me from accessing our joint bank accounts or credit cards. Julian wasn't just leaving me. He was protecting himself legally from any further damage I might cause. I drove home in a daze, the legal documents scattered across my passenger seat like evidence of my own destruction. When I pulled into our driveway, Julian's car was there, along with a moving truck. I found him in our bedroom, carefully packing his clothes into boxes, while Maris sat on the bed, looking confused and scared. "Daddy, why are you putting your clothes in boxes?" she asked. "I'm going to stay at Grandma and Grandpa's house for a while, sweetheart." "But why? Did you and Mommy have a fight?" Julian glanced at me standing in the doorway, then knelt down to Maris's eye level. "Sometimes adults need space to figure things out, but no matter what happens, I will always be your daddy and I will always love you. Can I come stay with you? You'll stay here with Mommy most of the time, but you'll visit me lots. We'll have special daddy-daughter days. Maris looked at me with those big brown eyes. Mummy, are you and Daddy getting divorced, like Tommy's parents? I felt like I was drowning. We're just taking some time apart, sweetheart. That's what Tommy's mom said before his dad moved to California. Julian finished packing and stood up. Maris, why don't you go downstairs and watch TV while Mommy and I talk? After she left, Julian turned to me with an expression I'd never seen before. Cold, distant, like he was looking at a stranger. The custody hearing is scheduled for next month, he said. I'm asking for primary custody with supervised visitation for you. Supervised? Julian, she's my daughter too. She's my daughter. I adopted her when she was 3, remember? After her biological father abandoned her. The reminder hit like a slap. Maris wasn't Julian's biological child, but he'd been the only father she'd ever known. He'd adopted her legally, loved her unconditionally, and now he was using that against me. You can't take her away from me. I'm not taking her away. I'm protecting her from the chaos you've created. What chaos? I made a mistake, Julian. I had coffee with an ex-boyfriend. That doesn't make me an unfit mother. Julian pulled out his phone and showed me a screenshot. It was a text message from Edric to me, dated yesterday. Can't stop thinking about you. When can we be together properly? My blood turned to ice. How did you get that? Your phone backed up to our shared cloud account. I have months of messages, Ersilia. Messages where you complain about me, where you discuss leaving me, where you and Edric make plans for a future together. Those were just fantasies. I never actually planned to leave. Didn't you? Because according to these messages, you've been discussing custody arrangements with Edric, talking about how Maris would adjust to having a new stepfather. I felt sick. Those late-night conversations with Edric had seemed harmless at the time, just daydreaming about impossible scenarios. I never thought Julian would see them. Julian, please. You're taking everything out of context. Am I? Let me read you some of your own words. He scrolled through his phone. Here's one from last week. I wish I had the courage to leave. Maris deserves to see her mother happy, not trapped in a loveless marriage. I was upset. Here's another one. Julian would probably be relieved if I left. He could find someone who fits into his perfect little world better than I do. Each message felt like a knife twisting in my chest. Seeing my own words reflected back at me, I realized how cruel and dismissive I'd been about the man who'd loved me unconditionally for 5 years. And here's my personal favorite, Julian continued, his voice deadly calm. Edric understands me in ways Julian never could. When we're together, I feel like myself again. I think Maris would love having him as a stepfather. He's so much more fun and spontaneous than Julian. I couldn't speak. I couldn't defend myself because there was no defense. I had written those things. I had betrayed not just my marriage vows, but my husband's trust in the most fundamental way. So you tell me, Ersilia, was this just coffee between old friends? Julian, please don't insult my intelligence any further. He walked toward the door, then paused. My lawyer has all of these messages. She also has statements from witnesses who saw you with Edric, credit card records, location data from your phone, and a very interesting affidavit from Edric himself. What kind of affidavit? The kind where he admits that your relationship was romantic and that you two were planning a future together. Apparently, when my lawyer's investigator contacted him, he was very forthcoming about the nature of your relationship. I felt the room spinning around me. He wouldn't do that. He already did. Turns out your great love isn't as loyal as you thought. Julian left me standing in our empty bedroom, surrounded by the wreckage of my own making. I tried calling Edric, but his phone went straight to voicemail. When I drove to his apartment, his neighbor told me he'd moved out suddenly 3 days ago, leaving no forwarding address. The man I'd destroyed my marriage for had disappeared the moment things got legally complicated. A month later, I sat in a courthouse conference room across from Julian and his lawyer, Patricia Morton. My own attorney, a public defender named James Walsh, looked overwhelmed by the mountain of evidence Patricia had assembled. Mrs. Venn, Patricia began, my client is prepared to offer you generous visitation rights and spousal support, but he's asking for primary custody of Maris. She's my daughter, I said weakly. According to the evidence, you've spent the last several months prioritizing an extramarital relationship over your parental responsibilities. The court takes a dim view of parents who lie to their children and create unstable home environments. Patricia spread out printed copies of my text messages with Edric, bank statements showing charges at restaurants and hotels, and photographs that Julian's investigator had taken of Edric and me together. Furthermore, your own words demonstrate a pattern of emotional instability and poor judgment. You've expressed repeatedly that you felt trapped by motherhood and marriage, that you wished you could start over with Mr. Sloane. I looked at Julian, hoping to see some trace of the man who'd once loved me, but his face was a mask of professional detachment. Julian, please, don't do this. Think about what's best for Maris. I'm thinking about what's best for Maris, he replied quietly. I'm thinking about providing her with a stable home environment where she doesn't have to wonder if Mommy is going to disappear with her boyfriend. I would never abandon Maris. Wouldn't you? Because according to your messages with Mr. Sloane, you discussed moving to another state with him. You talked about how a fresh start would be good for everyone. Patricia pulled out another document. This is Mr. Sloane's affidavit, sworn under penalty of perjury. In it, he states that you approached him about relocating together, that you discussed taking Maris with you, and that you expressed frustration about being tied down by your current living situation. I read Edric's statement with growing horror. He'd twisted every conversation we'd had, making it sound like I was planning to kidnap Maris and flee the state. He'd portrayed himself as a reluctant participant in my schemes, a man who'd tried to talk me out of destroying my family. This is all lies, I whispered. Is it? Patricia asked. Because we have corroborating evidence. Text messages where you discuss feeling suffocated by your responsibilities, where you fantasize about escaping your current life. The hearing lasted 3 hours. 3 hours of having my worst moments, my most selfish thoughts, my deepest betrayals laid out in clinical detail. By the end, I felt completely exposed, like every poor choice I'd made was on display for the world to judge. The judge, an older woman with kind but stern eyes, reviewed all the evidence carefully before rendering her decision. Mrs. Venn, while I understand that marriages sometimes fail and people make mistakes, the evidence presented today shows a pattern of deception, emotional instability, and poor judgment that raises serious concerns about your ability to provide a stable environment for your daughter. I felt my world collapsing. Therefore, I'm awarding primary custody to Mr. Venn, with supervised visitation for Mrs. Venn every other weekend and 1 evening per week. Mrs. Venn will also be required to undergo counselling before unsupervised visits can be considered. Your Honour, my lawyer began. Furthermore, given the evidence of financial irresponsibility and the potential flight risk indicated by Mrs. Venn's discussions of relocation, I'm ordering that all visits take place within the state, and Mrs. Venn's passport will be held by the court until further notice. I stared at the judge in shock. In 1 afternoon, I'd lost my husband, my home, my daughter, and my freedom to travel. Everything I'd taken for granted had been stripped away because of my own choices. Julian was awarded the house, the majority of our assets, and full control over Maris's education and medical decisions. I was left with supervised visits, a small monthly support payment, and the crushing realization that I'd destroyed my entire life for a man who'd betrayed me the moment it became inconvenient to support me. As we left the courthouse, Julian paused on the steps. I want you to know, he said quietly, that I never wanted it to end this way. I loved you, Ersilia. I loved you enough to forgive almost anything, but I couldn't forgive you putting our daughter at risk for your own selfish desires. I never put Maris at risk. You were planning to take her away from the only father she's ever known. You were going to uproot her entire life for a man she barely knew. If that's not putting her at risk, I don't know what is. He walked away, leaving me standing alone on the courthouse steps with a court order in my hands and the devastating knowledge that everything he'd said was true. 6 months later, I'm living in a small apartment across town, working the same administrative job and seeing Maris every other weekend under the watchful eye of a court-appointed supervisor. She's polite but distant, clearly confused by the dramatic changes in her life. Julian has started dating someone new, a software engineer named Sarah, who volunteers at Maris's school and makes her laugh. When I see them together during custody exchanges, I can see the family they're building, the stability they're providing for my daughter. Edric never contacted me again after giving his statement to Julian's lawyer. I heard through mutual friends that he moved to Portland and got engaged to someone else within 4 months. The great love affair I'd sacrificed everything for had been nothing more than an ego boost for him, a way to prove he could steal another man's wife. As I sit in my empty apartment tonight, looking at the court documents that legally ended my marriage, I finally understand what I've lost. I didn't just lose Julian. I lost my best friend, my partner, my daughter's respect, and my own self-worth. I told myself I was seeking closure by inviting Edric to our wedding. Instead, I opened a door that led to the destruction of everything I'd ever cared about. Julian was right when he said I'd made choices. Every lie, every secret meeting, every text message had been a choice to prioritize my own selfish desires over my family's well-being. The irony is that I thought I was trapped in my marriage, but I was actually trapped by my own inability to appreciate what I had. Julian never controlled me or suffocated me. He loved me unconditionally and trusted me completely. I destroyed that trust through my own actions, and now I'm truly trapped in a life of my own making. Tomorrow I have a supervised visit with Maris. She'll be polite but guarded, counting the hours until she can go home to Julian and Sarah. I'll pretend everything is fine, that this is just a temporary situation, but we both know better. I invited my ex to our wedding because I wanted closure. Instead, my husband closed the door on me, and I have no one to blame but myself.